Thanks for your presentation. Just a few, and look at if maybe the other part of you that should be answered in some of these. You talked about electric cars going into the future and that in the infrastructure that's required around the country, we're sort of way behind at the moment in when you hear people that has electric cars and trying to get charged here and there. If Ireland moves fast to electric cars with incentives in different places, it appears that we are not fit to keep up with having enough power points for it. The second question is, you talked about extra wind and going 40% and going, I know you talked about 16% and going higher. My understanding is the rock-off and generation from wind, obviously it's wind won't come in at a variable speed, that should be higher or lower. What is the cost to the generation mechanism, to basically the generators, where that wind comes into to basically smooth it out? I'm hearing prices of 700 or 800 million that DSB would have to spend. Is that right? And it's just a question that I'm throwing out to you. Microgeneration, you spoke about that, and I think a lot of the other deputies spoke about it. You were saying it's sort of a case of that there is, yes, to be produced in small amounts, but I can't see it being awful complicated. It's either you give a price for something or you don't. Do you know, that type of way that if it's 13 cent per unit or 20 cent or whatever way it is, you were saying there's no set tariffs or whatever, but can there not be a tariff set fairly easily? In the line of, you spoke about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, my vision of what you're doing is that you're saying to Joe Bloggs here with the electric or with the wind turbine, and the person with the solar and the person with the fossil fuel, we'll need X amount from you and X amount from you and X amount from you. If you keep getting a fair bit of wind and you're telling this guy here with the fossil, well, we don't want you that much now, will he not disappear? Can ye live without the fossil? My understanding is no. Am I correct in saying, and this is from information, that this year is probably, I'm not talking about the numbers of generators or wind turbines, that this year is one of the worst in history for generating wind with the speeds of wind, and the last 4 hours, the last 5 have been pretty bad. And you need, am I correct in saying as well that you will need, be it a gas power plant that will create electricity, or some type of what I would call a second engine on standby, because with the other types you cannot really rely on it. And the other one then, you spoke about the interconnector going from Ireland to France, and you spoke about exporting electricity to France, from my understanding. They have nuclear, is the understanding I have. Nuclear, I think, is the cheapest form of electricity. Why would they be taking stuff from us? Second of all, we heard a few years ago that we were going to export into England. How much are we exporting to England at the moment of wind? And thirdly, are we going to go down a road, or is there any danger in this, that if we get electricity from France pretty cheap, that we won't be bothered about that? Obviously money talks, and you're going to be, it's a business, and if you get it at a lower rate, that you would be more inclined to take it from there than telling somebody else that would be at a higher rate that I'll take it from you. And am I correct in saying that with the tariff on wind, that what the customer pays and what the person that owns the wind turbine, that they get more per unit than what the customer pays DSB for the electricity? And how much electricity, money's worth, do ye dump per year where you've gone into agreements that you have to adhere to under the renewables? Thank you.
Okay, there's a lot there. I'm going to what I was going to suggest, Robin, I'll pick up, Robin's suggesting I start with EVs because I drive an EV and I know an awful lot about the experience. And look, I mean, and that's, sorry, that's, it might sound joking, but it's true. And look, we don't have a role to play in this, very, very simply. But I am noticing, just as a consumer, lots of private companies are starting to put, if you're going to Aldi or Lidl, you can charge your electric car vehicle. So I do think the momentum's starting to build, just as a consumer. I speak as a consumer now, not as the CEO of EirGrid. And microgeneration, I know it's come up again, just to be really, I know it sounds simple, Deputy Fitzmaurice, but just to be really clear, you do need a policy framework, you need a technical way in which power can go from home to grid, you need proper regulation, re-tariff. We have none of that here at the moment. We have a very limited role to play in that, and I'm not ducking the question, but that's the reality of where we are at the moment. So I just wanted to close that one off. You talked about living without fossil fuels. Will be here. They're not going away off, disappearing, but they will exist into the future at a very low level on the system, because renewables will be the dominant source of generation, and then the kind of technology and the services that have been developed by EirGrid will allow fossils to operate at levels of very low levels of operation to provide system stability never previously dreamt of. And as long as the market provides appropriate remuneration for them to be there and to provide that service, then we've nothing to fear from a security of supply perspective. So we're very confident we have a very, very good handle on that. And working with the regulator and looking at supply demand going forward, I think this committee has nothing to fear from renewables going up and fossils going down, because we will manage the balance through our engineering capability. You mentioned interconnection with France. I mean, the modelling around the interconnector between Ireland and France. France has challenges in Brittany, in northern France. France has challenges with, it's going to wind out some of the nuclear. It needs renewables. We're a very attractive source of renewables for France through that interconnector. And all our modelling suggests that power will go more often Ireland to France than France to Ireland, but it will come from France to Ireland at times, but the dominant electron flow will be from France to England, and we both have developed a model that says the same, and that's vital for us, because if we ratchet up our renewables and then find ourselves at times during the day where there's nowhere to deploy it, then the economics of those projects get challenged, and they won't get built. Developers will not build these projects if they think 20% of the time they're going to be turned off and make no money. But if they know they can ship it off to France, then it works for all of us. And then you mentioned the cost about the wind. I mean, you asked a question about wind cost and what developers are being paid.
Yeah.
I mean, what
I'm saying is there is talk that between subsidy, that it works out like 20 cents a unit where the supplier...
I think if you look up the regulator's website, this is public domain information, what a wind farm developer gets paid under REFIT, which is the previous incentive mechanism, is a matter of public knowledge. And it's nothing like the numbers. It's certainly significantly below what a consumer is paying for electricity. So that's all public domain information. So. Now, Robin, there was a question on rock-off and cost generators.
Yeah, part of the journey that we've been on to get to being able to cope with more and more wind in the system is we've had to go back to the conventional generators, and we've had to ask them to change the way they run a little bit, and we've gone through a process of getting them to change the setting on a rock-off as a rate of change of frequency. So it's to protect that generator from sitting in its own little island and the frequency changing and damaging the plant. So we've been working with them to change their setting so that if there is an event on the system, we don't lose all the generators when we don't need to. So we want to keep them on the system, even though there's a bit of change of
involved in all of that. If you're going to, we'll say 80% wind or whatever.
Well, there's little cost in changing the rate of change of frequency setting. The generators, I don't know specifically how much a generator has to pay to get the rate of change of frequency relay changed to the new setting. But in doing so, it facilitates the renewable generation that we have on the system, and it helps to support the stream of system services rewards that they get for behaving in a manner that they need to keep our system stable.
And may I just say, if you look at the direction of travel, we've had the single electricity market, we now have the integrated single electricity market, you know, between generators being rewarded for trading their electricity, ancillary services or capacity payments. The overall pot and the cost of running the market is going down. It's not going up, it's going down. The direction of travel. It's becoming more competitive, and renewables, because the marginal cost is zero, because there's no fuel costs, is actually driving the cost down. It might be moving into slightly different buckets, but the price is going down overall of running the market. I think and there was one comment, there was one other comment you asked, Deputy, which was about the UK and what's happening in the interconnector east-west. Robin, you might just make a comment on the flows on that.
Yes. Well, the benefit of this integrated single electricity market, which commenced on the 1st of October of this year, is that the flows of energy on the interconnectors are much more competitive than they were previously. The arrangements previously couldn't guarantee that the trades were economic. And in addition to that, the trades across the interconnector are now done on a pan-European basis. So someone who wants to trade on interconnectors can trade on a number of interconnectors across Europe. And the evidence is that the trades on the interconnector are efficient. So there are times when the forecast is for lots of wind, then you will see a high export on the two interconnectors from the island to GB.
What about when I asked you about the amount of wind this year, have you the stats on that?
Oh.
The amount of wind.
Is this a good or a bad year for the wind community?
I'm not talking about it, but my understanding is that this year has been second worst in history for. I'm not talking about the numbers of turbines.
Yeah, for wind farms in general. Yeah, we don't have that data, Deputy. Okay. Anecdotally, I've heard references to that, but I haven't seen any data.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. I just have one little question in relation to the gate system and how that works in relation to connecting new projects, and just how that works and in relation to connecting them in order of their strategic importance. If you could just expand on how EirGrid does that, and I suppose that time, because I know you talk about the bigger projects rather than microgeneration and reaching our 2020 targets, and are you confident that we will connect all of those who are now currently in the queue by 2020? If you could expand on how it works and reaching the 2020 targets.
The direction of travel for 2020 looks very positive, in the sense that under the old Gate 3 process, most of the developers in question have their connection offers from us. They've signed their contracts, they've done their EPC procurement, and it looks like the direction of travel is good for 2020. To get us into the next world, which is 2020 to 2030, under government policy, the regulator has launched a process called ECP1, Enduring Connection Policy 1, and that's allowing the next batch of projects, both onshore wind, solar and battery, and has asked us to process those connections. So we have a very intensive process going on at the moment to do connection offers for onshore wind, for solar and for battery, which will allow those projects in due course to compete in the first generation of new support, next support scheme, which of course will be auctions. So there's a pipeline there of over 1,000 megawatts, which people are actively working on, and we expect many of those will compete at the first auction when that is announced in the next year or two.
And is there scope for a better kind of categorisation in relation to that queuing system of getting?
Yeah, I believe the next policy beyond DCP1, which we would, is a bridge between the old and maybe the future, I think they may very well be a case for a policy or a category that's specific, for example, to offshore, because it's quite different. So I think that will come into the mindset of both the policymakers and the regulators. And in any consultation they have with us, we would be maybe inclined to sort of suggest that you create a category that's very efficient and fit for purpose for that particular grouping of technologies.